You're listening to Fast Facts, Ask the Expert with Katrina Sanders, brought to you in part by our friends at TheraBreath. Stay tuned after the episode for a special message.
Hello, and welcome back to Ask the Expert. My name is Katrina Sanders, and I will be your expert this month as we unpack a very interesting, very timely, and relatively provocative question. And that is, how does vaping hurt our patients? Now, if you're anything like me, you are certainly seeing the presence of vaping on the rise. The use of vaping is actually spreading across all different kinds of patient populations. In fact, current data indicates that about 20% of high schoolers and even 5% of middle school aged students are reported to be using e-cigarettes across the United States, which means that we're seeing a very vulnerable patient population who are using vaping. What's more, we're also recognizing that vaping is not just vaping across the board. Depending on one of the 10,000 different types of vaping liquids that can be available, including vitamin C and even THC, there is a whole range or host of potential oral health and subsequent systemic consequences that we can see associated with the use of vaping. As of February of 2020, the US CDC notated that there were about 2,800 hospitalizations and 68 reported deaths caused by vaping complications. So it is important to note that although this episode will focus on potential oral health effects, there are in fact other safety or systemic health complications that we do need to take a look at, ranging from cariogenic potentials to even safety of the use of the device itself. Nevertheless, when we take a look at oral health complications, one of the biggest questions that we ask is there a higher risk of decay amongst individuals who vape? And current data does in fact corroborate that. Of particular interest, a little over 79% of individuals who are routine vapers are considered to be considered high caries risk. We also know that vaping tends to cause atypical carious patterns, which can certainly have its own implications. We're seeing this present not only in general dentistry, but particularly impacting pediatric dentists, and particularly those seeing a large number of adolescent patients who indulge in vaping. We therefore know that e-cigarette users should be directed toward a more thorough caries management strategy, integrating things like CAMBRA or caries management by risk assessment, as well as more prudent evaluation of potential carious issues. We also know that vaping components contain things like sucrose and sucralose. So the vaping discs that have a thick and viscous solution can be well retained onto the tooth structure, which can in fact contribute to the greater presence of dental caries. What's more, we have also looked at the oral health risks or complications associated with oral inflammation. And studies have actually compared, from a pilot standpoint, the differences in gingival response of smokers switching from smoking to vaping. And wouldn't you know it, in these research studies, these pilot studies that have looked at the presence of inflammation, it is quite concerning, the data we're seeing. We know that patients who are tobacco users do in fact have an augmented display of inflammation. We know that if you're a tobacco user, we oftentimes won't necessarily see the presence of bleeding. And in fact, when a tobacco user quits smoking, that we will likely oftentimes see a subsequent increase in bleeding immediately following that quitting because of how tobacco habits impact the vasculature system and the subsequent display of inflammation in the oral cavity. However, we've actually seen that it's not just aesthetically what the tissue looks like when the patient switches from smoking to vaping, but also the serum levels, the saliva levels, the concentration of gingival crevicular fluid that changes. And in these pilot studies, they have actually compared patients who quit smoking, or rather substituted that smoking for vaping, and found that that substitution of smoking for vaping increases gingival crevicular fluid concentration, increases the concentration of saliva and serum levels of inflammation. And so when you take a look at the data as we have it, when it comes to the proneness of decay and subsequent gingival inflammation, unfortunately, we are seeing a significant display of both of these common dental diseases affiliated with vaping. Thank you so much for joining me, Katrina Sanders, for another episode of Ask the Expert. Please feel free to check out the show notes for the research where I captured the data for today's episode. And as always, it was a pleasure. Please feel free to reach me on Instagram at The Dental Wine Genist or on my website, www.katrinasanders.com. Cheers.
Thank you for tuning in to Fast Facts Ask the Expert with Katrina Sanders, and thank you to our partner on this episode, TheraBreath. Do you have patients who need an antiseptic mouth rinse but don't like the burning sensation it causes? You can now recommend a simple solution they can add easily to their daily routine: new TheraBreath Deep Clean Mouth Rinse. Its antiseptic action formula does not cause a burning sensation because it's alcohol-free. TheraBreath Deep Clean Mouth Rinse only contains 6 key ingredients, including CPC, that kill 99.9% of bacteria that cause bad breath, plaque, and gingivitis. If you want to try a free sample, visit trytherabreath.com. That's trytherabreath.com.